Welcome to Sum It Up on July 17th, 2024, where I sum up my message from this past Sunday, which was freedom, slaves to righteousness. I talked about two primary ways in which we wind up giving up our freedom as believers. And one of that is sin, to where we continually give ourselves over to sin, even though we have had the bondage of sin broken. The old person has died, we've been set free. As Paul reminds us, if you've died, you've been set free from sin. That's one way that we find ourselves in bondage again. This second way we find ourselves in bondage again is a bondage to a yoke of slavery. Now, Paul uses the illustration that if you go back to the law, he was in particular talking about the issue of circumcision. The question had come up, what do Gentiles need to do to be Christians? And there were some that were pressing Gentile men that they needed to become circumcised in order to be a Christian. And Paul pushes back against that and says, they need the grace of God is what they need. They don't need a law that the Jewish people couldn't even live up to. It doesn't help you get to where you want to go. So the message ended talking about being slaves to righteousness. There were slaves to God. That's our calling, is to be God's people and to live as he would have us to live. Are you prepared to give up your life and live the life that God wants you to live? No longer being a slave to sin, but a slave to righteousness. Think about that for a second. What would it mean to do what God told you to do? Are you doing that in your life? If you're not, I challenge you to contemplate that there's a much better life to be lived out there, being a slave to God than being a slave to sin. Have a great week. God bless.